I think David deserves a hero's welcome. It is great to be here in Korea. It's great to be here at this event. I was practicing some of my Korean yesterday at a press conference, which I won't try to do again. But this is my first time at Korea Blockchain Week, and as some of you know, this is the first time we've done the XRPL Zone here in Seoul, and it's truly great to see the enthusiasm, the excitement, not just from the XRPL community, but also crypto more broadly. And this is only the second time ever David Schwartz and I have been on stage together. Yep. So it's kind of fun for us to talk about some of the things we have seen at Ripple, some of the things we've seen with XRP, and some of the things we've seen in crypto more broadly. So I figure we'll start there. David truly is, I mean, for those of you who don't know all of David's background, he truly is not just the co-creator of the XRP ledger, but he also is, or even before that, involved with some of the earliest days of Bitcoin, and just one of the truly original gangsters in crypto more broadly. So he has seen it all, and he's seen it grow from nothing to something quite spectacular that we see all over the world. So, David, where are we today? How does the current state of the XRPL align with the vision you guys had when you first started this back in 2011?
You know, it's been interesting. There have been things that have kind of come out the way that I think that I anticipated, and things that have just been completely wildly outside of my anticipation. I think the way in which there would be...
Actually, can I interrupt you? I was like, can you guys hear him okay? You can hear him. All right, just making sure. Great.
I think one of the things is institutional adoption has been sort of a little different than we anticipated. In some ways it's been slower than we thought. In some ways it's been much faster. I think institutional adoption from like non-financial institutions and non-financial companies has kind of been slow. I think we probably would have expected more of a bottom-up adoption, where like ordinary people would be using crypto first, like democratized remittances, for example, and that kind of didn't happen. But I think what did happen that's interesting is the sort of financial system was sort of right for adopting it. The way I think about it is tech has like absorbed other industries. Like tech ate retail through companies like Amazon, and tech ate music with digital downloads and streaming services, and I think tech is coming for finance, and I think we're seeing that with the institutional DeFi that we're seeing today. And these are extremely interesting because they're institutional adoption, but they're not just like Ripple was really early with institutional adoption for payments, but that wasn't institutions that brought their customers to the blockchain, right? The customer just made a payment, and the customer didn't know where it was
invisible. Yeah,
exactly. What I think we're just starting to see now is institutions that are doing things like issuing stable coins or tokenizing real-world assets, and they're actually bringing their customers to these layer one blockchains. And I think that's an interesting model for mass adoption that I think we're just starting to see right now.
But so when you think about the vision, and even, we'll talk, and I'm going off script a bit. We're supposed to cover certain things, but I already warned the team that we might go anywhere here.
Who's going to criticize him, right?
They can't yell at me.
He can just rip the
they do yell at me. But I'm genuinely curious, when, the original ideas of starting the XRP ledger, like what were some of the reasons you felt like, hey, we can build a better blockchain for payments? Like, just talk about maybe some of those early conversations of how it started.
I think the very earliest conception that we had is Bitcoin had just hit the public eye, and we had just started to learn about it. And I think one of the things that we realized is that even if you thought, as many people did at the time, that like Bitcoin would just take over the world, it's like many other things. Like you have a new religion, you think, well, if everybody just believed the same religion, it'd be great. But that could be, any payment network would be great if everybody in the world had access to it. Right. And we started to realize that this idea that Bitcoin would somehow solve interoperability because everybody would use it for everything was just as naive as believing that any payment system would sort of solve interoperability. Right. So what we started to look at with the XRP ledger at first was we thought the proof of work wasn't really going to work out. We were kind of ahead of time. So the first cracks were appearing in that narrative. And the other thing that we realized is like 99.99% of the world's value wasn't in blockchain at the time and wasn't going to be in the very near term. And so there had to be, I guess what we call today bridges, there had to be connectivity. And so one of the very first things that we built into the XRP ledger was issued assets, what we call stable coins today, and a DEX, and this sort of multi-asset. The idea that you would use the blockchain for settlement, but that it wouldn't necessarily just be a native cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it strikes me as someone who wasn't there at the very beginning that the foresight you all had around things like a DEX, an AMM, that really, I mean, it was way ahead. And I think, in my opinion, the XRP ledger doesn't get enough credit for, which I guess I hear you saying it really was born of the belief that if 99.9% of all value is not on chain, you have to find ways to actually get it on chain, make it liquid, make it accessible.
Yeah, it's funny that those concepts like have names now, and at the time, we didn't call it a DEX, but like we built a DEX in 2012. We didn't call them stable coins, but we had stable coins in the very early releases, and we also had something that is not radical at this time, but was radical then, which was accounts that you could manage. With Bitcoin, like if you have a receiving address and you want to change that receiving address because you want to manage your funds differently, you want to change like who can receive your payments, you have to give everybody a new address. It's very difficult to advertise this. This idea that an account being a thing that you could have and manage, which is alien to Bitcoin, but of course Ethereum is built around that concept. So yeah, it was kind of interesting watching, as the technology unfurled and some of those concepts. So Ethereum staked out its own place in the landscape.
Yeah, there's rumors out there that Vitalik he was an intern at Ripple before I was at Ripple. Yeah. To tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so sad.
By the way, we are way off script.
Whatever. It doesn't. It's so sad that didn't work out. I mean, can you imagine the great things Vitalik could have accomplished at Ripple? No, but seriously, though, Vitalik had some great ideas about smart contracts on layer one. And at one point, he stayed on Stefan's couch, our CTO at the time, and he shared his ideas. And we were obviously very, very impressed that, he had a clear vision, not that far ahead of its time, as it turned out. And he actually, Stefan, Thomas, myself, Arthur Brito at times, and Vitalik talked about like bringing layer one smart contracts to our design. And interestingly enough, there were a variety of reasons why we didn't grab onto that idea back then. I guess you could argue we're a little late to the party talking about that now. But I think, it would have been, it's an interesting counterfactual to imagine if Vitalik had persuaded Stefan, Arthur, and I to build smart contracts into layer one on the XRP ledger in the early days. But I think what we were concerned with is that it would, and you can see this with Ethereum, that it causes the transaction fees to go up and it reduces the transactions per second, and it does have costs. And obviously you can argue about, obviously it has benefits as well.
Well, so maybe I'm transitioning back to some of the stuff we were supposed to cover. Obviously, I'm sure most people here saw that earlier today, we announced our support and our belief around smart contract programmability and bringing that to the XRPL via kind of EVM sidechain, as well as exploring options for mainnet. What was it that changed your view? Because historically, that's something we have not leaned into as a company. Obviously, the XRPL community can do things independent of us. But what was it for you that made you feel like, hey, this is something we should support going forward?
It was a couple of things. I think one of them was I didn't think that a chain that wasn't built for smart contracts from the ground up could compete as a smart contract chain with chains like the EVM sidechain that are built for, programmability from the ground up. And I think the other factor was that if you build a new type of smart contracts, nobody knows how to use them. And so you sort of have to build an ecosystem from the ground up, whereas like with EVM compatibility, it's all already there. And Abradism, the tyranny of or versus the power of and, as long as there's no disadvantages to adopting smart contracts on layer one, then and is always a good answer. And so my concern was that there were some disadvantages to adopting smart contracts right at layer one. Fee instability, loss of transactions per second, and also just sort of data bloat. If you have a useful smart contract, it has to have a lot of information. And so those were the reasons why historically I didn't think smart contracts on the XRP ledger layer one made sense, because it couldn't compete with smart contract platforms. A couple of things have changed my opinion very recently, but I think the big one is that not being able to compete as a smart contract platform with like an EVM chain is like the wrong mental model to have. The question is not, does it allow you, it's like, I don't know, adding more cargo capacity to a car. Can it compete with a truck? Probably not. But still, there's people who like to carry around a lot of stuff in their cars, and being able to carry around more stuff is good.
Right.
And so I think what convinced me was people who said, look, your AMM implementation is great, but it doesn't do exactly what I need. Your NFT implementation is great, but it doesn't have this weird thing that I need. And if you gave me just a little bit of smart contract capability, just a little bit, not the whole thing, you're not trying to compete as the best smart contract platform, but you're trying to say, instead of being able to target 80% of the use cases with fixed function transactors, we can target 80% and then maybe another 15% with just a little bit of smart contracts. And then if we get confidence it's working well, TPS is okay, fees are stable, then we can add more and have a base to build off of. And that argument was persuasive with me. And I have to credit Legato at Orchestra Finance, who basically championed that argument with me and put the effort in to sort of walk me through his thinking, and he was very persuasive.
One of the many examples, I think, of how it does take a village, it takes a community, and certainly Ripple has been and will continue to be a very interested party in the success of XRPL. But I think that the fact that this came from kind of outside and influenced your thinking about it, I think is super important. And I think we'll continue to show some flexibility, I think, on our thinking about where does the future of the XRPL go and what support. Before we leave some of this topic, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I touched briefly on the automated market maker, AMM, as something that also has been, more investment in, more attention around more recently. Share your thoughts on why that's critical to the future of, I guess, DeFi and, where the XRPL is.
That it does a lot of different things. Most people's focus on the automated market maker is that it provides additional liquidity. That's important in a lot of cases. So we have a DEX already that has a central limit order book. So it's not like there's no liquidity. So on many platforms, there's no other way to get liquidity. But they have different strengths and weaknesses. An order book is really good for very popular pairs, like, XRP to RLUSD when RLUSD is launched. Probably the order book will be pretty good for that.
We'll talk more about RLUSD.
There'll be liquidity there. It'll be good for exchange. It'll be pretty good for exchange. But you have a long tail. So let's say there's hundreds of smaller projects that have assets. You have real-world asset, tokenized real-world assets. The AMM doesn't require somebody to actively be placing offers into an order book. And so imagining thousands of active markets with, traders placing offers is just unrealistic. The other interesting thing about the AMM is that assets like XRP are very volatile. The AMM actually executes a trading strategy on behalf of the people who provide liquidity to the AMM. And so it's an opportunity to get passive yield from the volatility, and that also helps to reduce the volatility, which makes digital assets like more viable financial products. But also, I think it's like the cornerstone of a DeFi ecosystem. Like it's the base of most of the DeFi ecosystems on many other chains. So, and of course, it has the continuous auction mechanism, which I don't know how many of you know about that, but it's a unique feature that reduces impermanent loss and gets a better yield for the token holders. So I think it's a great package.
So some of you may know this is supposed to be a conversation, and my strategy has been if I just keep asking him questions, I don't have to answer questions. But
tell us about RLUSD, bro.
Well, it is a good segue because, as we think about decentralized finance and the critical components, we've obviously talked about some here, but having a robust on XRPL stablecoin and enabling both effective on-ramps, off-ramps, liquidity around that is obviously pivotal. And I think what you've seen, there's a number of successful stablecoins out there, and I think those aren't going away. But I think the market overall is likely to grow significantly. Maybe it's 150 to 170 billion USD. And some people think it'll be north of 2 trillion or more than 10x in the next 5 years. And I think Ripple has always been focused on kind of a compliance first, lots of transparency. And when you think about the things that are so critical in the success of a stablecoin, lots of transparency, compliance first, those are really important things. And I think the success Ripple has had working with financial institutions, I think sets up for RLUSD or Ripple USD for success. And again, we think it helps the overall XRPL ecosystem because it just adds liquidity on Ledger. So we're excited about that. We are very close to, I think earlier today, somebody asked me for a timeline. I just said weeks, not months, because of, but we're getting there pretty quickly. And we just want to make sure we launch with kind of full regulatory oversight out of the gates to keep everybody happy.
I think having high quality stable coins on the XRP ledger is just, I mean, we know from other platforms that when they have high quality stable coins on there, total value locked increases, transaction flow increases, liquidity increases. It's just a key enabling technology. And it's just a great example of that thing where like the stablecoin issuers are some of the most regulated entities on the planet. If you look at Circle, if you look at what the hoops Ripple's having to jump through to launch RLUSD, probably nobody in this room will ever be able to do business with Ripple directly to get RLUSD. You'll get it through exchanges because we have to go through all of these complex rules for who we can do business with. And what's interesting about that, though, is that if you look at Circle USD, which is the same thing, many of you probably have USDC, but you didn't get it from Circle. You got it from an exchange, or you got it on a decentralized exchange, or somehow. What's interesting is that you will never do business with Circle. You will never be a direct Circle customer. You will never have an account at Circle. And yet, Circle's incredibly regulated product enables huge DeFi ecosystems that are completely anonymous. I mean, there could be terrorists in them. Probably, we hope not. There could be, but they don't do business with Circle. And I think you'll see that same thing. We have real DeFi ecosystems that are enabled. Real world asset tokenization is going to be the same way. The entities that are going to issue, let's say, U.S. Treasuries as tokenized, you're going to have to onboard with them and go through, know your customer and anti-money laundering. But if you put that in a pool on a DeFi system and you re-tokenize it or use it as collateral for a loan, you're going to have, this is what we mean by institutional DeFi, these institutional regulated products that on decentralized layer ones enable these DeFi use cases that are, pseudonymous and less regulated.
Well, so I think that also brings up, one of the things I don't think you could have predicted, and certainly when I joined Ripple in 2015, I couldn't have predicted, is just the growth of real world assets on chain. And obviously a stablecoin is an example of that, but we're seeing a bunch of other examples around that. And so I think one of the things that has surprised me the most in the last few years is seeing Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, publicly, this is one of the largest asset managers on the planet, publicly lean into his belief around tokenization of real world assets as a profound opportunity. And as some of you guys know, and I think certainly David and I spent time talking about, we've had a bunch of announcements on this front. Open Eden, most recently, doing the tokenization of U.S. Treasuries. I think Ripple may or may not have yet publicly announced we're actually going to allocate and buy about $10 million worth of Open Eden U.S. Treasuries, which will be kind of the on-chain version, if you will. But also, one of the things we announced at our last Apex, our developer conference, was a relationship with Archax, and I think he's on stage later today. Is that right? Do you know that?
No, I'm not sure.
All right. I think I'm supposed to give a plug around that. But I'm curious, any other surprises from you on real world assets, either why it's taken long or why it's happening quickly? What's your thoughts?
I think the biggest surprise for me is how quickly the major players seem to feel that this would be inevitable. They went from crypto's all a bunch of scams and it's never going to threaten TradFi, to starting to see that
lean in.
Yeah, we see polls where these institutional players believe that this is definitely going to happen. And the interesting thing about that is that means that they need to establish defensible positions. And I think that kind of segues interestingly into our play in custody with the acquisition of Medico, to put ourselves in a position to, people who issue real world assets, they're not going to all want to build their own platforms and management and all that.
I think that's super important. When you think about where Ripple's strategy is, how do we continue to help propel and support the XRP infrastructure? Custody is, in my opinion, something super important, not just for the XRPL, but for the industry overall. And if you believe that real world assets are going to be supported at scale, you need better and more robust and more flexible custody solutions, frankly, also at lower cost.
Yeah.
A lot of the players in the custody business, in my opinion, in the ecosystem today, some of the leading custody players are pretty expensive.
And they don't have a lot of competition.
They don't have a lot of competition, and so I think there's an opportunity, and again, one of the reasons why Ripple Custody, and we've actually seen great traction both with the biggest of the big. I think we publicly announced HSBC is a customer there, as well as some other kind of tier one banks. I would love to hear your thoughts, shifting gears a little bit. One of the things we announced not too long ago was this Japan-Korea XRPL fund, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, this region has always been, for as long as I can remember, one of the major areas where there's been development, where there's been, an active community. And we decided that we wanted to have like a separate fund that was just to ensure that this area got the focus that it deserved. And there's tremendous opportunities with direct grants. There's opportunities for partnerships, support, technical support from us. And, there's a number of different ways that you can build. You can build on the EVM sidechain. It's difficult to find people with XRP ledger expertise. It's difficult to find people who understand our ecosystem specifically. So the EVM sidechain will let people build very quickly using tools that they're familiar with without having to sort of go through that steeper learning curve. But if you're new to the space and you don't have EVM expertise, the XRP ledger is a great platform to build on. It's not particularly complicated. It's different. So if you have to learn something, you can certainly build on the XRP ledger and take advantage of the opportunities that the fund's going to provide. And then, of course, if you really are interested, the XRP ledger doesn't have programmability at layer 1 yet. It's just a proposal, and it always needs new features. We're not exactly sure how we're going to support some of these more sophisticated DeFi features. Loans is fairly new, and so there's plenty of room to contribute code and ideas. We would love to see more community participation in the evolution of the XRP ledger itself. So all of those opportunities are available.
I'll actually highlight one thing David just said that I believe we need to, as a community, continue to support and find ways to support is around the yield-bearing solutions on XRPL, which I think we've seen people toy around with. We certainly want to support those things. I think that will be a natural evolution. I took out my phone to look at, we're running overtime, and I'm sure someone's going to yell at me soon. They said no one yells at me. They do, I promise. A couple things, though, before we leave. One is, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the first time we've done the XRPL Zone in Seoul. This has been awesome so far. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I will give another plug. There's a happy hour in this location this evening. Another thing we have not, I don't think, announced, we are doing Apex, which is the developer conference that Ripple hosts around XRP. Last year was in Amsterdam. We have, I think, not yet announced. It will be in Singapore in June of 2025.
You just announced it.
I just announced it.
Right. Yeah, that was the announcement.
Yeah. I get in a lot of trouble because I know things that I'm not supposed to say, and I forget what I'm allowed to say and not allowed to say. I end up saying things that,
anyway,
I always get myself in trouble with somebody. All right, so yes.
them.
All right, so look, very excited to get back to Apex. The biggest one yet was last year in Amsterdam that has grown almost 2 or 3x every time. So I hope we get all of you in Singapore. We'll make sure there's space there. But look, I also want to just a heartfelt thank you. I think this community is robust and thriving because of all of you, not because of Ripple. And I think it's all of you that make XRP such an amazing community to be a part of. I feel lucky, and I know David feels lucky that Ripple can be a part of that and continue to support it. But thank you for being here today. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. And David, I always learn something talking to David Schwartz, so thank you very much.
This has been amazing. Thanks to all of you. And stay tuned, because I'm going to talk to Yorgos. I hope I didn't pronounce that wrong. Vlachos from Axela.
Awesome.
Live episode of Blockstars.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.